I remember the first time I discovered the power of will, not as a word spoken by philosophers or preachers, but as something living within me, silent and invisible, waiting for my recognition. It was not in a temple or under the spell of a sacred book, but in the midst of my ordinary, restless life. I was tired of delay, weary of dreaming without doing, sick of the half-hearted efforts that dissolved into excuses. My mind had been a field of unfulfilled intentions, scattered seeds never allowed to take root. Then one day, while sitting alone in a cafe crowded with people pursuing their own purposes, I realized that my greatest enemy was not circumstance, nor fate, nor the judgment of others, it was the quiet absence of the will to do. That moment did not come with thunder or revelation. It arrived like a whisper, a subtle vibration that said, "You have thought long enough. Now act." Those 4 words, simple yet electric, changed the entire rhythm of my being. I began to see that thought, however noble, is but vapor until the will gives it form. The universe, I understood, is not moved by wishes but by directed energy, and will is that energy translated into motion. From that day I began my experiment with the unseen law. I watched my own mind as though it were a living laboratory. Every time a desire arose, to learn, to build, to improve, to rise, I examined whether it was merely a fleeting fancy or a genuine command of will. The difference was profound. Desire is a beggar, will is a king. Desire asks, will demands. Desire hopes, will knows. And so I trained myself to know. In modern life we are surrounded by distractions that weaken the will. Our devices, our feeds, our endless supply of entertainment, they fragment the attention and scatter the energy that could have been harnessed into power. I saw in myself how easily enthusiasm evaporated when the will was left unexercised. I would resolve to wake early, to write, to discipline my body or improve my craft. But without the firm inward grip of determination, these intentions faded like morning mist. The will, I learned, must be trained as one trains a muscle, through resistance, repetition, and faith in unseen growth. It began with small acts. I forced myself to finish what I started, even in trivial matters. If I opened a book, I would not lay it aside unfinished. If I set out for a walk, I would walk the full distance I planned. These were minor victories, but they accumulated. They created a chain of evidence that my will was real and responsive. Every time I kept a promise to myself, a silent current grew stronger within me. It was not pride, but power, the calm assurance that I could command myself. And then, one day, life tested that power. I had long dreamed of leaving my unfulfilling job to pursue my own creative work. I had written notes, plans, outlines, pages of preparation, but never crossed the line into decision. Fear, that ancient thief of initiative, whispered its old arguments: security, stability, what will they think? But another voice, calmer, deeper, rose within me: will it? It was not an emotion. It was a decree. I felt a strange quiet descend upon my mind, as though I had stepped into the center of a great silence. In that silence, I acted. I resigned, not in rebellion but in clarity. I had moved from thinking to doing, from drifting to directing. In the days that followed, doubt attacked me with renewed vigor. The human mind is a clever saboteur, it remembers every failure, exaggerates every uncertainty. Yet I discovered that once the will is truly set, these inner storms cannot undo it. The will does not argue, it proceeds. It does not wait for perfect conditions, it creates them. I worked through the nights, shaping my ideas into substance, enduring fatigue without complaint. I learned that energy flows where the will commands it to flow. When I felt weary, I told myself, you are not tired, you are being tested. The body obeyed, and strength returned. This, I saw, was the ancient secret taught in forgotten schools of thought, the mastery of self through the law of directed will. It is not mysticism, it is mechanics of mind. The universe itself is but the expression of infinite will in motion, and man, made in its image, is endowed with the same principle. Most men live as if they are reeds swaying in the wind of circumstance. The few who awaken the will become the wind itself. I observed others and saw how success or failure traced back to this one principle. The man who complains of opportunity lacks will. The one who rises from adversity possesses it. Talent, education, or luck may open doors, but only will keeps them open. Even love, the most divine of human emotions, decays without the will to nurture it. I began to understand that will is the golden thread woven through all creation, the mover behind every deed, the invisible architect of destiny. There were nights when doubt whispered again, when my effort seemed barren, when fatigue clouded my purpose. But in those moments I practiced the inner command, stand still and will. I would breathe deeply and recall that all power exists in the present instant, not in the memory of failure nor the anxiety of future. The will acts only now. And so, by returning to the now, I reclaimed my strength. Through these experiences I noticed a transformation not only in my work but in my perception of life itself. I saw that the world responds to the vibration of our inner state. The man of strong will carries with him a magnetic influence. He does not need to shout or demand, his very presence speaks of command. It is as if the atoms themselves align with his purpose. Strangers sense it. Circumstances yield to it. Obstacles rearrange before it. It is not force but firmness, not aggression but direction. One morning, while walking through the city, I observed the contrast between those who drifted aimlessly and those who walked with intention. It was visible in their posture, in their eyes. The difference was the invisible power of will manifesting in flesh and motion. I realized then that to will is to live consciously, to refuse to be carried by the mechanical currents of habit. The unconscious man reacts, the man of will creates. Over time I learned that will and faith are twin forces. Faith perceives the unseen, will materializes it. Faith is the vision, will is the builder. When these two act in harmony, the impossible becomes inevitable. Many pray for change but fail to exercise the will that completes prayer. For prayer without will is a wish, and will without faith is blind. But when both unite, heaven and earth conspire to fulfill them. There came a season when I faced loss, both financial and personal, and the temptation to retreat into despair was strong. Yet I remembered the law, the will that has conquered once can conquer again. I sat in stillness and refused the hypnosis of fear. I told myself, this too shall serve my strength. And indeed, from that low valley rose the greatest clarity I had ever known. The will is not proven by success but by persistence through seeming defeat. I began teaching this principle, not as a doctrine but as a discovery. Some listened with interest, others with skepticism. It sounds too simple, they said. You cannot change life by merely willing it. But I told them, you are willing life at every moment, you simply do it unconsciously. Every hesitation, every excuse, every surrender is also an act of will, but inverted. The universe accepts your command, whether it be courage or cowardice. The law is impartial, it returns what you project. Modern science speaks of energy, vibration, and frequency. The mystics of old spoke of spirit. They are describing the same thing through different tongues. The will is the conductor between thought and action, the switch that channels energy from the unseen to the seen. When you concentrate your will, you are aligning yourself with the creative current that formed stars and cells alike. To live without will is to drift apart from that current, to become a fragment instead of a force. I remember one night, exhausted but unwilling to stop, when I understood something deeper. The will is not only the power to do, it is the power to continue. Persistence is the highest form of will, for it outlasts emotion. Inspiration is the spark, but will is the flame that endures the wind. And in that endurance, character is born. As I strengthened my will, I noticed that fear lost its hold. Fear thrives in indecision. The moment one decides firmly, fear dissolves. It feeds on hesitation. But the will cuts through uncertainty like light through mist. When you say within yourself, "It shall be done," the entire machinery of your being aligns to fulfill that command. The body responds, the mind clears, the external world begins to shift subtly toward your decree. This is not superstition, it is the law of mental causation. There are those who say that willpower is limited, that one can exhaust it as one would a battery. I disagree. True will is not strained effort, it is alignment. It does not drain, it directs. Fatigue comes from friction, not from flow. When your will aligns with your purpose, energy becomes inexhaustible, for you are drawing from the infinite source. The universe wastes no power on indecision, but it floods the determined soul with strength. At times, people ask me, what if I do not feel strong? What if I am uncertain or weak? I tell them, act as if you were strong, and strength will awaken. The will grows by assumption. To will is to claim the state before it appears. You do not wait for courage, you will courage. You do not wait for clarity, you will clarity. The act itself becomes the cause. The mind, obedient to repetition, soon accepts as truth what the will affirms. The more I studied myself, the more I saw that will is inseparable from self-respect. To will is to honor your own command. Every broken promise weakens confidence, every fulfilled one fortifies it. That is why discipline is sacred, it is self-respect made visible. When you say, I will, and mean it, you are affirming your divinity, your share in the universal creative force. You cease being a victim of moods and become their master. Years passed, and the principle only deepened. I watched others transform through the same discovery. One young woman, paralyzed by anxiety, began practicing small acts of will, rising early, confronting what she feared, speaking her truth. Within months, her whole bearing changed. Another man, trapped in endless planning, decided to act daily without waiting for perfection. His life unfolded like a book long closed. It was never about talent or luck, it was about awakening that central fire, the will to do. There is a quiet joy that comes with this mastery, a sense of inner stability untouched by outer turbulence. The man of will is not immune to difficulty, he simply refuses to be ruled by it. He sees every obstacle as a field for greater strength. When the world says no, he answers yes from within, and that yes becomes a creative force. I learned to thank even my delays, for they tested the endurance of my will, and every test passed became a treasure of confidence. In moments of solitude, I often reflect on how much of human misery springs from inaction. Men wait for permission, from others, from life, from God, to begin. But the law waits for no one. It responds instantly to the vibration of will. The moment you decide and act, unseen energies arrange themselves in your favor. Procrastination is disbelief in one's own divinity. To delay is to deny. To will is to affirm. Sometimes I walk through the city at night and feel the pulse of human desire vibrating through every lighted window. So many dreams, so many intentions floating without anchor. And I think, if each of those souls would but awaken the will to do, how the world would transform overnight. The genius of humanity lies dormant, not for lack of intelligence but for lack of will. The great revolutions of progress are not made by the clever, but by the decided. I do not mean that the will should become ruthless or blind. True will is guided by wisdom, tempered by compassion. It is not the will to dominate others, but the will to direct oneself. When rightly used, it radiates harmony, not conflict. The strong will uplifts rather than suppresses. It becomes a beacon, silently inspiring others to rise in their own power. Even now, as I write these words, I can feel that same quiet current within me, the one I first sensed years ago in that crowded cafe. It has grown into a steady presence, a companion in every undertaking. I no longer ask whether I can, I decide that I will. The distinction is subtle but immense. Doubt questions, will declares. And declaration, repeated and believed, becomes creation. There will always be those who mock the unseen laws, who call such teachings idealistic or naive. Yet I have seen too much to doubt. I have witnessed transformation in myself and in others that defies conventional explanation. The will, once awakened, reshapes the very pattern of reality. It is not magic, it is mastery. To the untrained mind it appears mysterious, but to the one who practices, it is as natural as breathing. If I could leave a single message to those who seek change, it would be this: stop waiting for the perfect hour. The perfect hour is now. Begin with the smallest act of doing, and the momentum of will shall carry you forward. Each act strengthens the next, each victory builds upon itself until you stand unshakable. The will is like a flame, feed it with attention and it grows, neglect it and it dims. But once it burns steadily, no storm can extinguish it. I have come to believe that every soul is born with a purpose, but that purpose remains inert until animated by will. The mind may conceive the vision, the heart may desire it, but only will gives it life. To will is to say to the universe, let there be light, and the light appears. It is the divine spark in human form, the bridge between spirit and matter. And so, each morning, before the day begins its clamor, I sit in silence and affirm, I will to do, I will to be, I will to become. It is not a plea but a proclamation. I feel the current rise within me, linking my small individual will with the vast universal one. In that union there is no struggle, only flow. I move through the day not as one pushed by duty but drawn by destiny. Looking back now, I see that my life began not when I was born, but when I first willed. For to will is to awaken. Every moment of clarity, every act of courage, every step forward in faith has been a manifestation of that single power, the will to do. It has carried me through fear, failure, and fatigue. It has shaped my work, my relationships, my very sense of existence. And perhaps, when my journey here concludes, that same will shall guide me beyond, for it is not bound to body or time. It is the eternal directive of consciousness, forever creating, forever becoming. To live by it is to live in harmony with the pulse of the cosmos itself. So I say to you, as I once said to myself, do not wait for strength, will it. Do not wait for clarity, will it. Do not wait for opportunity, will it. The power you seek is not outside you, it is the living will within, ready to act the moment you command. Stand up, affirm your purpose, and move forward. The universe bends to the decided soul. For there is no fate stronger than the will to do. And as I sit now in contemplation, I realize that the more one exercises the will, the subtler its workings become. It is not always in dramatic action that the will manifests, though those moments of bold decision are striking. Often it is in the quiet persistence, the refusal to surrender to inertia, the constant, almost invisible nudges that guide one steadily forward. I have come to see that the ordinary hours of life are the proving ground for extraordinary power. The way a man keeps his schedule, the way he honors or disregards small commitments, the manner in which he persists against minor distractions, these are the true measures of the strength of will. I recall a colleague who lamented his inability to complete a writing project. He would begin with enthusiasm and abandon it at the slightest difficulty. When I suggested he dedicate a fixed portion of his day to writing, no matter how small, and commit to it as if it were a sacred appointment, he scoffed. Yet when he obeyed, even minimally, a strange transformation occurred. The will awakened within him, like a seed that had lain dormant. Soon he was writing daily, finishing chapters, and feeling a confidence that no external validation could have provided. It is always so, the will once exercised multiplies, grows, and commands further action. I have discovered that modern life, with all its conveniences, presents both opportunity and peril. Convenience tends to weaken the will. When everything is easily obtained, when every task can be postponed with the press of a button, the will is not trained. It is stretched thin and becomes fragile. The man who desires to become strong in will must deliberately impose resistance, introduce discipline where none naturally exists, and practice delayed gratification. He must choose difficulty, for therein lies growth. The law is consistent: what the will repeatedly demands of itself, the universe will honor. One cannot help but notice how technology, despite its marvels, has created a culture of passive engagement. Scrolling endlessly, consuming without creating, reacting without choosing, these behaviors fragment energy and dull the will. I have made it a practice to observe my attention. Every time it wanders unconsciously, I bring it back, I affirm my purpose, I act with intention. Such small, repeated exercises may seem trivial, but they are the building blocks of power. The man who cannot govern his own attention cannot govern his life. There was a period in my own life when the temptation to be idle and complain was almost irresistible. I felt a stagnation in my creative work, a sense of futility that whispered incessantly. Yet I remembered the principle: the will is not moved by feeling but by command. I resolved that day, not to wait for inspiration, not to hope for clarity, but simply to act. I worked through resistance, forcing motion where none existed, insisting that my own energy obey me. And in the doing, I discovered that will itself is contagious. Once the mind and body act in concert, motivation arises naturally, clarity emerges, and obstacles begin to diminish. I have come to regard will as a kind of moral and spiritual compass. It is not merely a mechanism for achieving material ends, it is the affirmation of selfhood in its highest sense. A person who wields the will consciously does not merely accomplish tasks, he shapes his character. Each act of deliberate choice is a declaration of identity. To act without will is to drift, to act with will is to manifest the self fully, in accordance with principle and vision. There is a subtle power in knowing the limits of one's own will, as paradoxical as it may seem. One does not become stronger by exhausting oneself blindly, but by learning where to direct effort and where to conserve it. It is the wise application of will, not its reckless expenditure, that yields enduring mastery. One must cultivate patience as a companion to power, for action without reflection may achieve results but rarely produces fulfillment. The true will acts with insight, not compulsion. I remember a young entrepreneur who sought success through frantic effort, believing that action alone could secure results. He labored ceaselessly yet accomplished little. When I introduced the notion of the deliberate will, focused, intentional, unwavering in small daily steps, he was skeptical. Yet when he adopted it, choosing priorities and following them without distraction, he found progress accelerating. It was as if the universe had been waiting for his clear command, and once issued, energies aligned to produce outcomes previously thought impossible. This is the invisible law in operation: the universe responds not to chaos, but to direction. In my personal life, the will has proven equally transformative. Relationships, too, are molded by the strength and clarity of intention. The patience to listen, the discipline to honor commitments, the courage to confront difficulties directly, these are expressions of will. To love, to forgive, to nurture, these acts require the same inner power as the creation of a business or the pursuit of knowledge. Without will, emotion drifts; with will, emotion becomes art, and art becomes life. It is also important to note that the will is not static. It grows as it is exercised, yet it must be renewed continually. Each day presents new opportunities for its demonstration, new tests of endurance and clarity. One cannot rely on yesterday's victories to sustain today's effort. The man of will must be vigilant, for the mind is a trickster, prone to distraction, complacency, and forgetfulness. The practice of will is continuous, like the tending of a fire. Unattended, it dies; attended, it grows and radiates warmth. There is a profound satisfaction in this discipline, one that is not rooted in external recognition but in internal harmony. To observe oneself acting decisively, to witness the transformation of thought into reality, to see the world respond subtly to one's directed energy, this is joy of a rare and enduring kind. The modern soul, so often adrift in the currents of external expectation, finds in the cultivation of will a grounding force, a central axis upon which life may turn with purpose and grace. I have come to view challenges as allies rather than enemies. Each difficulty is a test, each obstacle a mirror reflecting the strength or weakness of one's determination. When confronted with adversity, I do not ask, "Why me?" I ask, "How can my will manifest here?" In every trial lies the opportunity to strengthen, refine, and demonstrate the power to do. The man who perceives life as a series of lessons rather than arbitrary misfortunes is never defeated, he is only trained. Yet, the practice of will requires humility. One must not mistake personal desire for universal law, nor confuse persistence with stubbornness. True will listens as well as acts, discerns as well as directs. It is an intelligent force, not a blind impulse. The more refined the will, the more harmonious its manifestation, for it then aligns with larger patterns of reality rather than clashing against them. Mastery of will is mastery of self, and mastery of self is alignment with the greater order of existence. I have also observed the remarkable effect of collective will. When groups of people act with a unified purpose, the results are multiplied beyond the sum of individual efforts. This principle explains the formation of civilizations, the accomplishment of monumental works, the realization of common ideals. Yet even within the collective, the individual must maintain clarity of purpose. One's personal will is the unit of the larger force, it cannot be surrendered without weakening the whole. Each decision, each act, each small affirmation contributes to the invisible fabric of collective achievement. In moments of quiet reflection, I often marvel at the simplicity yet profundity of the law. The universe itself, immense and complex, operates on principles that can be mirrored in the human mind. As the stars move in predictable courses, as the tides respond to lunar influence, so too does the world respond to the directed will of consciousness. One may study physics, economics, or sociology and miss the fundamental truth: intention, properly focused, moves worlds. It is the invisible lever, the hidden key, the silent architect of all outcomes. There are times when I encounter those who despair of their circumstances, who feel powerless before life's challenges. I approach them not with argument but with illustration, sharing stories of small triumphs, daily exercises of will, the transformation of ordinary lives into purposeful existence. Often they respond with skepticism, yet a spark is kindled. The human mind, when touched by evidence of possibility, begins to stretch. The will, once recognized as a living principle, refuses to remain dormant. I have seen students of this law begin with trivial victories, a commitment to rise earlier, to complete a minor task, to speak one truth, and then proceed to monumental achievements. It is always the same pattern: small acts of will grow cumulatively, developing momentum until the individual is a force to be reckoned with. The law is impartial, generous, and patient. It honors persistence, clarity, and courage. In modern times, I find that the need for will is greater than ever. The distractions are myriad, the temptations abundant, the pace relentless. To drift is easy, to act consciously is rare. Yet in this rarity lies the opportunity. Those who awaken the will in such an age discover not only personal power but the capacity to influence others, to shape circumstances, and to contribute meaningfully to the world. The law rewards decisiveness, clarity, and action, and these qualities are cultivated daily. And so I continue, as I have for years, practicing the will in all aspects of life. Each morning I rise with intention, each day I act with purpose, each challenge I meet with calm determination. I remind myself that nothing external can weaken the will, only neglect, doubt, or surrender can do so. The current flows within, and when it is harnessed, one discovers an inexhaustible reservoir of energy, insight, and courage. I encourage every reader who contemplates these words to test this principle. Begin with the smallest act, insist upon its completion, and observe the effect. Repeat, daily, without exception. Watch as the mind sharpens, the body obeys, and the world responds. The will to do is not a promise, not a theory, not an abstraction. It is a living, operating force, waiting for recognition and application. The secret is simplicity itself, will to act, act with persistence, and observe the unfolding. No other formula is required. Doubt, fear, and procrastination are illusions to be discarded. Thought alone is powerless, desire alone is vapor. Only will, clear, deliberate, and unwavering, becomes motion, manifestation, and reality. And in the quiet moments, when the world slows and the mind turns inward, I feel the current of this law flowing stronger than ever. I see the possibilities of my life, the potential of others, the unfolding of countless dreams, all waiting for the command of will. To will is to awaken, to act is to live, to persist is to triumph. There is no greater power, no surer principle, no more faithful companion than the will to do. In truth, one may spend a lifetime learning this lesson, yet each day offers new depth, new clarity, new mastery. And so I continue, not as a master, but as a diligent student, observing, practicing, refining, and directing. The will to do is the cornerstone of human greatness, the spark of divinity within, the eternal current that transforms thought into reality, dream into action, and potential into achievement. It is simple. It is profound. It is yours. Will it. Act upon it. Persist without doubt. And you will know, as I have come to know, that the universe itself bends to the decided soul.